All right, I am recording. All right, it's good to know. Very good. Okay, well, welcome everybody to our sixth session. Tonight's agenda, change model case study presentations. First we'll have Sandra, then we'll have Kenneth. Then I'll give you some time on emotional intelligence. It's breaking me down, but I'm going to get through it one way or another. And then we'll look at upcoming events and stuff. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Okay, change model case study presentations. Sandra, you're going to be up first. So if you would please, just tell me when you're like ready to roll, and we'll roll.
Okay, let me hit my timer. All right, I'm ready.
Okay, you know the discussion. There you go. Okay.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sandra Reddish, and I've selected the Time and Attendance Collection System, a 21st Century Vision for Change, as my change model case study presentation. Kotter believes, and I quote, that change is often a traumatic event for the workforce and the organization. Companies, whether large or small, operate in a competitive environment that is constantly changing. Technology and manufacturing advancements are happening at rapid rates and being driven by rising consumer demand in a global economic environment. Even government agencies have long prided themselves in levels and levels of management, bureaucracy, red tape, and they are now having to find new ways to lead the changes necessary for their very survival. No organization can think itself safe or be complacent in a world full of internal and external threats, globalization, and fierce competition. My organization, the U.S. Postal Service, a quasi-federal agency, had not changed its payroll system since 1962, but it had just received a mandate to change from PSDS, the Postal Source Data System, to TACS, Time and Attendance Collection System. TACS was mandated to be operational within 4 months. This meant that thousands of supervisors and managers around the country needed to buy into the new system and to be trained to use it. Teams of change leaders or tax ambassadors were recruited and trained to take the organization's time and attendance payroll system and its managers and supervisors into the 21st century. The change effort would be epic, urgent, and involve hundreds and thousands of people. But more importantly, it meant that supervisors, managers, and other leaders were being made to switch from using an antiquated PSDS system to TACS. The change model selected to help resolve this issue was Kotter's 8-stage change model, as it was relevant to the urgent problem the U.S. Postal Service faced. Oh, we already on the next slide. The change issue facing our leadership, no, not yet, Dr. K. That slide. Yes. The change issue facing our leadership team at the U.S. Postal Service was getting 1,600 supervisors, managers, and executives in our district to stop using an outdated PSDS Postal Service data system and to buy into the new TACS 21st century payroll system. Being a part of the district's tax ambassador leadership team and one of his trainers meant that I and my team had to lay the foundation for the new change in payroll systems. As we met to discuss and develop strategies for communication, rollout, and implementation, we understood that helping supervisors and managers who had worked at the Postal Service for 30 to 40 years meant transition to the new change would be very difficult. It would be worse than pulling teeth. TACS would replace the antiquated PSDS Postal Source data system within 4 months. The Postal Source data system had been in place since 1962. It will replace 4 other pay systems once fully operational. PSDS was so wonderful for so many years for our supervisors and managers because they didn't have to correct payroll and operational errors. The numbers used for different pay functions and different mail processing or customer service functions. If PSDS made an error, supervisors and managers only had to walk into the PSD office, send them an email, or hand them the form PS 2240 for a payroll adjustment. How simple was that? A workforce totaling 699,000 employees needed to be switched from PSDS to TACS. This was a large-scale change initiative to be completed in 4 months, and it could prove very problematic. Every pay period or every 2 weeks, employees would complain that their checks were wrong, that they worked more of their overtime hours than PSDS showed, or they worked a holiday that was not on their checks, and they wanted it corrected right now. As a supervisor/manager, I had to make a lot of payroll adjustments. As an employee who had been underpaid and frustrated, I knew just how everyone felt. Tax is a 21st century web-based technology providing access to an Oracle database through the U.S. Postal Service's intranet, and the software was desperately needed in the U.S. Postal Service. Tax was cutting-edge technology that would be instrumental in resolving pay issues. PSDS would become obsolete. Tax would save millions of dollars each year for the 699,000 postal employees in clock ring and operational errors and human errors, and provide accurate, up-to-date reports. It was urgent that we train all supervisors, managers, and executives in the Atlanta district. We needed to do that immediately. They were convinced that it would be very difficult, that they were already stressed from performing all sorts of HR functions. They did service talks, they trained their employees in mail processing and customer service, and this was on top of making 70 to 80 dispatches a night or during the day, depending on whether you were in customer service or mail processing. And tax would just mess up a good payroll system like PSDS. Many of the supervisors and managers and executives resisted the change effort. Leaders were in their comfort zones because no matter how many employees weren't paid properly, they could always blame the errors and the problems on PSDS. PSDS was also the source for many union grievances and arbitrations and EEO complaints because of payroll inequities. PSDS was handling payroll for mail processing, customer service, and rural carriers. The system was fraught with errors and inefficiencies. Tax, however, would increase operational efficiencies across the nation, but we needed to get help from leaders and influencers who understood the 21st century vision for the organization. Our team was given 4 months to train all users on the new payroll system. Classes would go from Monday through Thursday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. However, even this would be problematic because of scheduling issues, vacation, sick leave, and other training taken during this time would need to be considered. Once users were trained, they were expected to use the new tax payroll system immediately. However, many of them wanted to still rely on PSDS, and this office became a barrier to the transition to the new payroll system because it would take time to phase it out after everyone was trained to use tax. The 200 PSDS employees were fearful, and they didn't want the new time and attendance collection system because it would mean that many of them would lose their jobs and have to come back to the workroom floor. If you know anything about the Postal Service and mail processing and customer service, those jobs, those office jobs are considered luxury jobs because if you're not in an office, you're running around on the workroom floor chasing mail and chasing employees. PSDS employees definitely represented a barrier to the change effort. They wanted supervisors and managers to abandon the system before they even started using it because they needed to hold on to their jobs. However, as Dr. McDonald said in her seminar, and I quote, "Change can be planned or unplanned." Tax was a planned change coming out of Washington, D.C., and it was expected that everyone would get on board or else. Supervisors and managers were overwhelmed with HR functions and did not want to learn the new system. Many supervisors felt that tax would add to their workload. Some were boasting that they would never use it. And the little elves in PSDS and the rumor mill about tax being a lot of extra work was already spreading like wildfire through the Atlanta district. Our tax team wanted to lead the change with a sense of urgency, and we had our work cut out for us. We needed a change model system and process because we were mandated to move quickly. The Kotter H-stage model was selected for this change model study presentation because it embodies the H-stage process needed to lead the U.S. Postal Service's large-scale change effort. The tax 21st century payroll system will reduce errors, provide accurate reports, improve operational efficiency, and eliminate PSDS and replace 5-time and attendance systems. It would also save the U.S. Postal Service $70 million a year. Yet, with all of this information, that change was still being resisted. Next slide, Dr. K. Let's look at how the Kotter 8-stage change model was the right model to select to help the employees at the U.S. Postal Service make the epic transition into the 21st century. As stated, there are 8 stages in Kotter's change model. Let's look at each of the 8 stages of Kotter's model to find out what the tax ambassador leadership team needed to do to make it through a large-scale organizational change. Number 1, create a sense of urgency around the big opportunity. This was critical. According to Kotter, rally executives, employees, resources to establish urgency and get buy-in because complacency could not be tolerated. Number 2, form a powerful guiding coalition of volunteers. Put together groups from all over the organization. Select transformational, credible, powerful, competent change leaders, influencers, people from all over the organization to move the vision forward and to get buy-in. Number 3, develop the vision and strategy for the future. The vision provides direction and clarity for the future and helps change leaders motivate others. The strategy incorporates the vision, the plan, and the finances, and the support and resources needed. Leaders must provide the vision and the strategic goals and plan to move the change effort forward. Number 4, communicate the vision. As Dr. McDonald said in her seminar, communicate, and then over-communicate the vision. Because change is very difficult. Use multiple platforms throughout the organization to communicate. But leaders should lead the way in communicating the change by leading by example and learning to listen. Number 5, remove obstacles and barriers that stand in the way of the change effort. Empower people to make decisions. Remove layers of management, bureaucracy, according to Kotter, and structures that impede growth. Number 6, generate and celebrate small wins and big wins. They help drive change and keep employees motivated and engaged to stay on track. Reward small wins. Number 7, continue to build on the core changes. Change leaders should provide the support and resources and training and follow-up and feedback to build on the change effort. Number 8, anchor the change to the culture. Organizational culture has a powerful impact on any change effort. Kotter states that socialization and indoctrination can wreak havoc on new practices and ideas when leading change. Organizational cultures do not change overnight. It takes years. And change leaders must monitor the change effort and understand that everyone will not make it through the change. Now, we're still going to stay on this slide. Now, I will relate Kotter's 8-stage change model to how our team could get 1,600 supervisors, managers, and executives to transition from PSDS over to tax. Number 1, my tax leadership team created a sense of urgency around the big opportunity, and that was learning the new system. And we met with all of the Atlanta district leaders and managers to bring them up to speed on tax and how it would benefit the U.S. Postal Service. We informed them that this change was serious and it was coming out of Washington, D.C. This was a national change initiative, and we needed their cooperation and support because we would need to move quickly to get everyone trained to use the new system. This would be one of the greatest opportunities, rallying around the big opportunity, the greatest opportunity to impact the way we pay our employees, generate accurate and timely reports, and save $70 million a year. The Postal Service was already losing $7 to $9 billion each year due to the drop in first-class mail volume and fierce competition for flats and parcel delivery from FedEx and UPS. We immediately enlisted the help of transformational leaders who supported the change, asking them to go back to their plants and customer service offices and rural carrier offices to spread a positive message about tax. That is, we wanted them to know and tell the people that tax was people friendly and user friendly, and it would replace PSDS in a good way. Managers and supervisors would have accurate, up-to-date reports, and human payroll errors would basically be eliminated. The U.S. Postal Service could save $70 million a year with the new tax system. Number two, we formed powerful coalitions. As a tax leader, I enlisted the help of the plant manager, district manager, mail processing supervisors, managers, and employees by attending service talks. I attended town halls to gain support for the change effort. Many volunteered to help to tell others about the important benefits of that the change effort would bring. We got the unions involved because y'all tax would reduce the need for union grievances and arbitrations due to payroll errors. These change agents worked with us and gave us valuable insights and ideas and ways to help get buy-in from supervisors and managers who were resisting the change to tax. Many of the influencers played golf with them or hung out with them, they helped us push the new change. The coalition turned into a large group of supervisors and leaders and managers who provided new ideas to facilitate change. Number three, have a vision and strategy for the change. Our leadership team modeled the change that we wanted to see in others. We assigned areas within our district and asked that this 21st century vision for change be pushed by each leader in the district. I encouraged them to talk about it and let employees know that it would make their lives so much easier, because at the press of a button, accurate reports for pay locations, mail processing, and customer service functions, including sick leave, annual leave, leave without pay, family medical leave, clock wing errors, and other operational functions would allow them to increase or decrease overtime and schedule workers when mail volumes were heavy or light. The tax system would be more efficient and effective for users. It would hold employees accountable. It would paint an accurate picture of the cost savings and cost overruns for each operation. This would help tax leaders drive the vision. Number four, we communicated the vision. As a tax leader for the Atlanta mail processing facility, it was my duty to use all available postal platforms to communicate the vision for success of the tax payroll system. In my first class of postal leaders, I explained to each user that this system would bring our organization into the 21st century. I found out that many of the supervisors and managers were afraid of the computer, and that's why they relied on PSDS and the clerks and the acting supervisors and the acting managers to input time. I asked them to join with us to make the change to tax. I knew they were afraid, but I was there to cheer them on and to provide all the help they needed to learn how to use tax. Also in my first class with tax was a manager from customer service who was afraid to even touch the computer. Our tax leadership team had to use coaching techniques because we noticed that many of them who had 30 and 40 years of service had no real hands-on experience with the computer. The vision was communicated through our postal intranet, bulletin boards, training classes, service talks, town hall meetings, or wherever we went, and we were advertising with our t-shirts to employees to learn about the new change effort. I used influencers to rebuke the rumor mill and the PSDS effect. Number five, we removed obstacles and barriers. To help facilitate this epic change effort, I spoke with the employees in PSDS. They were gossiping and spreading so many rumors because they would soon be phased out. The tax leadership team met, and I suggested that we enlist some of the PSDS employees to train them to use tax. We had to get buy-in from this group of employees. Once they found out that there would be a tax office and some of them could possibly transition to that office, they got on board with the vision. Many of them took the opportunity to explore new job options within the Atlanta district since the new tax payroll system was mandated by headquarters. Number six, we found creative ways to celebrate small wins and big wins in our facility. Tax was going live and nationwide within 4 months. Each of the trainees were reassured that someone from the tax leadership team would be there to answer any questions they had. We established tax ambassadors for each plant and customer service units in our district. We also had a tax helpline hotline with someone trained from PSDS to man our phones. We would pull random reports to ensure that the supervisors and managers in my plant were clearing up clockwork errors and inputting data correctly. This was celebrated by a shout out over the PA system for the operation who cleared their errors, and we always gave away tax t-shirts. We had our communications department take pictures for our district's Postal Service magazine, where we featured supervisors and managers successfully using the tax system. Number 7, I continued to build on the core change by getting constant feedback from supervisors and managers in the Atlanta district. Our leadership team wanted to know how things were going, and we wanted to hear their concerns. So we met frequently during and after the 4-month change event to ensure that users were feeling better about the system and were adapting to the new change. Eventually, the EARN system was merged with tax, and now it's been modernized, and employees have an app they can download on their mobile phone or a computer to check to see if their work hours are accurate. Number 8, we anchored the change to the culture. Our tax leadership team believed that the only way this could be done was to speak to the supervisors and managers who feared the new tax system. And we had to reassure them that even though this was a planned change, they would benefit. It would make their jobs so much easier. Once employees saw that the older supervisors and managers were willing to use the system and found it easier to use, the change from PSDS to tax slowly started to become a part of the new payroll and attendance culture in the Atlanta PNDC and across the nation. This was a monumental effort, but the change leaders, the tax ambassador teams, the managers, the supervisors, the employees, the influencers, they were instrumental in transitioning employees from PSDS to tax. Slide 4, Dr. K. The action plan. Here are the steps in the action plan. First, it was to use Kotter's 8-stage change model process to help managers and supervisors transition from using the old PSDS postal source data system to the new time and attendance collection system. Number 2, we needed to get buy-in for the vision and the strategy from transformational leaders and influencers throughout the organization. So we sought the help of plant managers, district managers, and all sorts of leaders and stakeholders, and even the union, because you know the unions, we had 2 unions. We had the mail handlers union and the clerks union, and they fought us on everything that we did, but we even enlisted their support. Number 3, we needed to communicate the new vision for the new 21st century payroll system. We used the postal intranet. We had it on bulletin boards, we did town hall meetings, service talks, and we pushed it in our classroom training. Number 4, we generated a sense of urgency around the big opportunity to gain support and buy-in. We pushed employees out of their comfort zone and helped them to move forward. That was not easy. Number 5, we trained 1,600 supervisors and managers, and we had teams of like 5 different training groups, and we helped them to move forward from PSDS to tax. Our team began the process of building a culture of trust, integrity, and respect. We had to listen to the fears and the concerns of the supervisors, because remember now, many of these supervisors and managers had been there for 30 and 40 years. And we motivated them to learn to use the new system. We helped them to feel empowered, and they were engaged, and they knew that they could trust us to tell them the truth about what was happening and how it would benefit them. Number 7, the tax leadership team needed to evaluate the effectiveness of the new payroll attendance system and the training. However, we left that really to headquarters. They were already touting a return on investment of $70 million a year for cost savings, and tax would eliminate the old antiquated PSDS system and provide accurate operational reports, reducing human error and reducing the need for payroll adjustments. Our change leadership team continued to ask for feedback, and we observed the user's behavior for 3 months after the training occurred. We also had tax experts posted at each facility to provide additional training and user support. My team and I led the change effort with a positive attitude. Number 8, we were there to help employees deal with their emotions and their fears. You all know change scares a lot of people, and we had a lot of fearful employees. The managers and supervisors didn't want to use the system, so we had to gently coach and push them towards using that system. Number 9, we removed barriers such as PSDS. We cut through layers of management and false information, because there was a lot of false information and rumors about tax. We reassured the supervisors and the managers that tax is cutting edge technology and user friendly. Number 10, our team celebrated every win. We celebrated supervisors who were willing to learn the system and coached others into change. Tours who completed their tax and errors report were celebrated, and we celebrated throughout the district and the nation when tax went live. The lessons I learned, or that we learned, I learned how difficult large-scale change initiatives are for people and organizations, because we gotta have people to buy into the change for the change to take place. Leaders must be willing to listen to employees and their concerns and their fears. Transformational leadership, as Dr. K said last week, is critical in providing the vision, strategy, and the emotional support for large-scale organizational change. Our leadership team was patient and kind, and we motivated people to adapt to the new change. Change is emotional for employees because of the fear of change. John Bentley said, and I quote, that people experience all types of emotions with change. They go through loss, confusion, and they transition eventually to new beginnings. This happens at different rates, and leaders have to deal with people where they are. However, many people won't accept change. We saw where it took some supervisors and managers so much longer to learn the new system. So that meant that our team had to be patient. It was literally teaching some of these people who were making all of this money, who had been there for 30 and 40 years. We were teaching them how to use the computer. Because remember what I said, they had 204Bs, acting managers, clerks. Clerks should never be working with time. They should never be inputting time. But we found out that they had all sorts of stuff going on, and that they were heavily relying on PSDS to make the changes because it was easy. It was easy. All they had to do was submit the form, and PSDS would make the change. So it took a lot for us to help these supervisors, managers, and executives to accept this change. But this change was not going anywhere, so they had to accept it anyway. Finally, what I learned is that change leaders must lead the change effort with vision, with passion, with empathy, and integrity. And most of all, we had to develop a culture of trust so that new changes could be facilitated. Because now, remember, this was one epic change, but there were other changes coming. So we had to lay the groundwork for the Postal Service to move into the 21st century with all the new changes that were coming down from Washington, D.C. And in closing, I want to leave you with this quote from Socrates. And he says, the secret of change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but building what's new. And my next slide. And here's my final slide, and the references are listed. Thank you, everyone. And now I'll take any questions you may have. Thank you, Dr. K. That's it.
No, it's not. Don't be shy now.
Well,
I got to tell you though, wow,
yeah.
and that was stunning. So thank you
Thank
for that
you.
wonderful,
Thank you.
enthusiastic presentation. You restored my my faith in the postal system, I've got to say.
Thank you, Dr. K. Mine too.
There you go. All right, let's get some questions.
Miss Sandra, I just have to say, I'm bowing down to you because your presentation just phenomenal. Just the enthusiastic, the zeal of just really understanding and owning that process that you had with the Postal Service, and just grabbing hold to it. The whole presentation was just, I was captivated from very beginning, and just how you presented it, and then the ways that you navigated through those different departments, and to really fully paint the picture that it does take a whole team to get to move make some dramatic change like that with the U.S. Postal Service. So I'm just super impressed on it, or thankful that you even presented it that way. It's just a lot of zeal. I think that your face is on that T-shirt, so it's just awesome, just awesome, just the whole presentation. And my only question would be how the department that you mentioned that was real vital, that it was early in your presentation. I wrote it down.
PSDS.
Yes.
Yeah.
PSDS group. I don't think I have a question. You answered everything that I had, but I just felt like that you highlighted them and how important they were, and didn't leave them out by including them in that transition. Either it was like a call center or this troubleshooting center, and made them a part of it. I think that's real vital in change leadership, is that we try to find what their passion is and try to include them in it instead of excluding them in a sense. So I think it was a great job. Awesome.
Thank you.
So
you know
much.
what, Carlos, I want to follow up on what you just said, because that unit, PSDS, remember now, it had been in effect since 1962. And all we had to do when I was supervising or managing and I had a payroll adjustment issue, all I had to do was walk in and say, look, y'all got my employees checked wrong and they're angry. They're standing out there angry right now. So what are you going to do about it? Okay, Sandra, wait. I'm looking at stacks and stacks of paper on their desk where they got to make all these changes. And when they found out tax was coming on board, I would go in the office to talk to them. I went in deliberately to talk to them one day, the ringleader, and she was so upset. Why are y'all changing us? And who do y'all think y'all are? And y'all will never survive. And blah blah blah. I went back and I told our group, I said, we got to do something. They're gonna mess all of this up. So we went back in, and I told them, I said, so let's just bring a couple of them on board. And we did. And then when we changed over to a tax office, many of them were in that office.
Wow. I mean, that's putting value in the human capital.
Yes.
Just use what they have and just try to implement it into what we're doing, or in that transition. I think it's great.
Yes.
You did a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlos.
Appreciate it.
I see a hand, Jamil.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Jamil.
You did so good. I expect nothing less.
Thank you, Jamil.
You did so good. My only question was, I know that you noted that this was a national change that came from headquarters in Washington. Did you ever notice a difference in participation when it came towards a national change versus if you all were doing something privately within your own organization?
Well, you know what, Jamil, what I noticed was, even though it was a national mandate, these people were still stuck.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't care. In our training, in the training rooms, we went at this for 4 months. We had 5 different training teams. And I came on early in the morning to get those early morning people. Mm-hmm. And we would be in the rooms and they were like, I'm not using that. I don't care what headquarters says. I don't want to use that. I'm come to find out the reason that they didn't want to use it was fear. Many of them didn't even know. They were never inputting their own data. They had other people doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they could use PSDS. But yeah, they didn't care. They didn't care whether it's mandated, but and like we told them, it's going to happen with you or without you.
Yeah, I know, because I noticed, like, I know within my organization, like, if it's something coming from headquarters, you kind of have no choice. But if it's something coming, we're doing within our organization, they're like, well, I learn it whenever I learn it. But I notice people put a little bit more pep in their step when it's something coming from headquarters versus just something internally.
Well, once we let them know that this was going to happen with or without you, and we did it in a very delicate way in our training room, they were like, because many of them could go ahead and retire. But who wanted to retire from all that money? They didn't want to do that. So they got on board.
Okay. Well, thank you. Awesome job.
Thank you.
All right, Jamaris, you've had your hand up a little bit, so you'll take the last question, the final word.
Gotcha. Hey, great job, Sandra. I just got one quick question for you.
Yes.
I was as I was listening and you spoke about the 4-month period that you all had, like, were you all given any reason why you will only have those 4 months just to move that? Because it seemed like a big transition. So why were you all only given that 4-month period?
It was going live in 4 months.
Okay.
See, what was happening was this, Jamarius. After we did our initial training, that 1-week training for supervisors, managers, and executives in our training program that we ran for 4 months, as each group went through, each group was expected to go back and start using tax immediately. It was really live when we were doing the training, but the national rollout to confirm that it was live, we're live now, wasn't going to really happen until that 4-month period. But as we trained them, they were expected to go right back to their workstations, to their customer service offices, to their plants, and use tax.
Gotcha.
And yes. Any other questions? Oh,
no,
Dr.
I think that'll be it. You did a wonderful job. So good.
Thank you, Dr. K.
All right. So I'm glad I'm not going after you. So that's all I got to say. So, all right. So let's do this. Let's take a short break. Come back at 1:45, and when we do, we will have Kenneth up, and he will do his thing. So see you in about 5 minutes. Hey, Kenneth, how you doing? I didn't mute you, but I don't know how.
There it is. It might help. Yes.
There you go. There you go. So
Do I look
when we
normal
left
size
off,
on your screen, or am I small there too?
no, just on yours. You're large on mine, small on yours. And when other people come up, then you'll be sharing the screen with them.
Okay.
Kind of how that goes in the gallery. Talking about the gallery. So, for some reason I thought you'd be in your car.
Well, thankfully we still got power in the building, and just IT must have taken the entire server down for one of their unexpected fixes. Because theoretically nobody's supposed to be here after dark. So.
Right. So when they fix you, when they fix it, they fixed you, didn't they?
Because apparently the world of education only functions on bankers' hours in their minds, and that doesn't make any sense to me. So, because you know as well as I do, that's not true.
Yeah, I get it. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm glad you're back up.
I will say the Microsoft Teams app on the telephone is a free download, and it actually works fairly decently. So
it does. I've had to use it on more than one occasion when I caught between places, if you will. So it's good. I'm going to assume everybody's back. I don't see everybody's smiling faces, but that's probably the best I can do at the moment. So, oh, there we go. Yeah. All right. Oh, there's Sandra. Okay. And Jamil and everybody. All right. Good to go. Good to go. Okay. So here we are once again. And this time we're going to have Kenneth. And Kenneth, are you operating your own screen, or you want me to do slides? How's that going?
If you would do my slides for me, that would be amazing, because I don't believe it gives me an option on the phone to be able to scroll through these.
I got you. So when you're ready, just start.
Okay, let me see. It's showing my picture, not the slide. Hold on, okay. I can see the slides now. I'm sorry. Well, good evening. My name is Kenneth Kirkland, and I want to share with you my change model, which I've labeled "If it ain't broke, why are you messing with it?" And it's our road to nursing apprenticeships in the state of Alabama. And so, if you're wondering why I chose nursing of all of our disciplines, we have 25 disciplines, which we'll get into in just a few minutes. But nursing is right now, according to the governor's office, the most in-demand healthcare occupation in our state. And apprenticeships in nursing are something that historically have not been done in our state. So next slide, please. So our change issue, or as the slide says, issues, I want to give you a quick overview of the two-year community college system in Alabama. As far as just, I'm a history nerd and I love history, so I just want to share with you that the community college system was started over a 10-minute hallway conversation between George C. Wallace and our Lieutenant Governor Albert P. Brewer on how to use the beer tax from the 21 counties in our state that had went wet. And so they used it, and then George Wallace put a community or technical school at that time in every county that was primarily one of his voting districts. And so when you go and look into our history, you'll find where George Wallace even chose down to who was going to be the janitor in certain voting districts at those technical colleges. Today, we represent 24 colleges and 191 instructional sites across the state of Alabama. Most of those 24 colleges are still the original institutions, and you cannot set foot on any of our community colleges without finding a Lurleen B. Wallace or George Wallace or Wallace administration building somewhere on campus. Between those 24 institutions, one of them is Marion Military Institute. It's one of our two-year military academies with accession into armed services. And then we have Ingram State Technical College, which is correctional education. And so it is the only community college in our state that focuses entirely on correctional education. At the other 22 institutions, there's a representation or a mixture of 25 health career pathways across the state. And so our colleges produce traditional or credit-bearing students. We offer dual enrollment, and of course there's non-credit or sometimes workforce development, which deals primarily with incumbent workers. And if you've not heard that term before, incumbent workers are if I've got a company and I need to train 25 people in forklift operation or overhead cranes or even leadership classes, those are the type of non-credit or workforce development courses that we're able to offer. And so in 2017, Governor Kay Ivey rolled out her strategic plan. And the phases of her strategic plan specific to education included 3 big areas. One of those was what she calls pre to 3, or from pre-K to 3rd grade education, because the amount of research that shows that the most developmental stages of when that learning really begins to take place is between pre-K to 3rd grade. And if you've built the great foundation for that you're really setting those children up for success moving forward. And then something that she calls Computers for Alabama, and that's computer literacy in every level from kindergarten all the way through into college. Some form of computer literacy programs so that students are coming out prepared to be able to use technology, but there's also technology for the 21st century in those institutions as well. And then the third piece, which really pertains to the 2-year college system, is what's called Success Plus. And I'll give you links to this in the references on Success Plus if you really want to go and look this up. But Success Plus features her plan to put out 500,000 credentialed workers by 2025. And by credentialed, she means credentials of value. And so one of the things that we had to do as a system and a state was develop what's called the ACCCP, which is the Alabama Committee on Career and Credentialed Pathways. And what this committee did was it looked into every credential given in K-12 and the 2-year college system that enabled or supposedly enabled individuals to be able to go and seek employment. And so in our secondary or K-12 world, so many of our superintendents' report cards are built around how well credentialed those high school seniors are as they're coming out of high school, or what credentials did those students earn. And probably the most prominent one that we found in many of the schools who were doing a less than desirable job of credentialing students was that there was a credential being given for the sanitation of a hairbrush. But because it helped the superintendent's report card, technically they were doing their jobs. And the college system wasn't any better either. We found that either in dual enrollment or non-credit, or even in some of those traditional classes, there were credentials in either career technical or even sometimes in some of those health courses that credential alone was not anything that employers valued. And so between the 79 career clusters, we formed what's called technical advisory committees, which are made up of the 7 workforce regions, a subject matter expert from the college, 2-year colleges, and the subject matter expert from K-12, and the subject matter expert from the Department of Labor and Department of Commerce. And what they do is they begin to look at what employers actually value and would choose to hire individuals who presented applications of employment with. And they created a really interesting, it's probably about a 15-digit taxonomy code for each of those credentials being delivered in the state of Alabama. And so what that means is that they'll be able to not only track the lifespan of that credential through that individual through workforce, but they'll also be able to say, for example, if I'm at Toyota, Mazda, or Honda, and I've got 10,000 employees with this credential that's going to expire in the next 18 months, these are the community colleges around that employer who offer that credential that can be brought in to begin training that incumbent workforce early versus when they need it. And just trying to really put us on the same plane of being able to provide employers not only jobs that are of value to them, but also those credentials. I think the most troubling piece for the 2-year college system is that the state plan for this includes occupations off of what's called a 5-star rating system. So, for example, if I'm a nursing assistant, that 5-star rating system would mean that the career is in high demand, it's high growth, and it's high wage. And high wage is 75% above minimum wage. And the other two relate to credentials of value and a workforce need specific maybe to that region. What's challenging with this is that they've tied the state's Perkins dollars or Carl D. Perkins funds. These are federal dollars for career technical education administered through K-12 and the community college system. And a lot of our education programs are funded by Carl D. Perkins. So if your occupation is not listed on the annual list of high demand occupations, your program can no longer be funded through Perkins. You have to find locally funded dollars. And for a lot of our colleges, that means that program is going to be shut down because there's no longer an avenue to be able to fund or stand those programs up. And so from that challenge, a lot of resistance has started to form from the colleges of, you can't tell me what college programs I can and can't operate from a state level. And the response back to that is, we just did. The next part of this is Act 2019-506, which established the apprenticeship law, or the Alabama Apprenticeship Act. This placed the two-year college system as the legally appointed intermediary between K-12 and workforce, which means we're now legally mandated to offer apprenticeships in all of these high demand growth sectors. If you're not familiar with apprenticeships, a lot of times you'll hear apprenticeships are used in what they call the trades. And sometimes the trades kind of seems a very demeaning term to me, but you know, an apprenticeship can be done in any occupation, providing that the minimum number of hours is about 450 clock hours or more. And there's several different types of apprenticeship out there, from time-based apprenticeships, which are usually upwards of 2,000 hours on the job, or they can be a hybrid, which is a form of on-job learning mixed with competency-based learning in the classroom as well. And it's this kind of perfect marriage of you're growing your own employees. And if you look at the research for apprenticeships, they really help with long-term employee retention, but they also help with producing a skilled workforce as well, because what apprenticeships allow you to be able to do when they're registered through the Department of Labor is they're portable. So should the student ever leave that employment mid-apprenticeship, they can go to another job that offers that same apprenticeship and plug in where they met those credentials up to that point and continue forward from there. So as I mentioned before, Alabama's never utilized nursing apprenticeships. And so when we knew early in May of 2019 that we were going to have to start developing apprenticeships, and we started looking at those governor's workforce lists of here's the careers that we expect apprenticeships to be developed, nursing led the most in-demand occupation in all 7 regions across the state. We feature predominantly as a need to develop this because as the two-year college system, we develop 62% of Alabama's nursing workforce. And that's between registered nurses and licensed practical nurses. So the first thing we did was dig into what is required of an apprentice. And so when they're doing the on-job learning, they're technically on the time clock with the employer because the employer has hired you to go through that apprenticeship. And typically what I describe this as is if you imagine subway track A is your education pathway, well, subway track B running right parallel to that is the actual apprenticeship where what you're learning in the classroom is matching the competencies that you're doing on the job so that you're learning apples and apples, not apples and oranges. And so I developed a proposal that we sent next door to the Board of Nursing to allow what was called student nurse permits for them to be able to be apprentices. And the reason we needed to do this was because a student nurse in the state of Alabama cannot practice nursing unless they're under the direct supervision of a clinical supervisor. So when you go to clinicals in nursing school, you're in a group of 8 individuals with a clinical instructor. And that clinical instructor, you're technically practicing under his or her license. And so that's not going to work if I'm technically on the clock with an employer. And so in our proposal, we said this temporary permit would allow them to be able to practice the scope of nursing as a nursing student only if they were in a registered apprenticeship program. Well, they loved the proposal. The Board of Nursing unanimously opposed it or supported it, excuse me. And then they came back and said, wait a second, we can't talk to student nurses. And my first thought was, what are you talking about? You can't talk to student nurses. Somebody calls you, what do you mean? The Alabama Nurse Practice Act that establishes the Alabama Board of Nursing deals specifically only in graduate nurses. So if I started a nursing program and I maybe had a DUI or I had a prior felony, you're going to get ruled out fairly quickly by the drug screen and background check policy. But technically, you could complete that nursing program, and the Board of Nursing can't tell you you're not eligible to be a nurse in this state until you're a graduate nurse. Crazy, right? I know, my mind's blown every time I talk about it. So the proposal that we sent over, the Board of Nursing had to get with their legislative supporters and create House Bill 101, which basically added one sentence to the Alabama Nurse Practice Act that said, from time to time, the Alabama Board of Nursing reserves the right to create and amend administrative code pertaining to the regulation of student nurse apprenticeships. So the House bill goes to the 2020 House of Representatives. It was passed unanimously in the House. They absolutely loved it, and they passed it in March of 2020 to the Senate. It was read on the floor of the Senate and referred to the Healthcare Committee. And then COVID hit and derailed the rest of the legislative process for the entire year of 2020. There was some talk at one point that they were going to return back in August and September to a special session to try and clean up some of those local sourced bills that pertain to tax codes, et cetera. But the other part of the legislative process couldn't be approved because technically the two-year college and the K-12 world's budgets had not been approved to amend the Education Trust Fund moving into the next legislative year. And COVID interrupted every bit of that. And so there was a little bit of maybe some work behind the scenes to come back for one day, vote the budgets that needed to be voted, and everything else just died in the Senate. And so that's the background. That's the issue of what led to what we're working on today. And so next slide, please. So as I started looking through the different change models that were out there, I really was drawn to Worley and Mohrmans' engage and learn model because it's not necessarily a framework of how to implement like some of those other models were, but also as you're looking at the black and white picture or figure one on the right, I think what draws me to this is it's there's no starting point, there's no ending point. And it's not sequential. You don't have to do awareness before you can do design. But it is also, I think, easy to explain. I kind of started trying to think of if I had to go next door and explain to our Alabama legislators what model were we using to help drive this change. I think this is the less scary or pictorial version of change model that I can show them, because as much as I love Kotter and I love those 8 stages and I love Passmore's complex continuous change, but I don't think that our legislators like to see complicated. And so a picture sometimes speaks 1,000 words. And so what I love about this model is it's very fluid and kind of Zen-like in that, in order to learn, you have to actively engage. And in engaging, you're learning. And it's a continual cycle in that awareness, design, how they tailor these programs, and then overall on how you monitor and adapt. But I also believe that this really characterizes how organizations can change quickly and adapt to the environment that they're put in. And I believe that truly describes this complex case that we're discussing tonight. And so I wanted to kind of walk through just a few of them with you. And the references, it takes you directly to the PDF that gives you a lot of information about this model if you're interested afterwards. But in that awareness routine, as they call it, you're seeking out that information. And so I think for us, this described how we sought out information about what is apprenticeships and what's going to be required of those students. And in doing so, it helped build that intelligence going into how is this proposal going to be designed even, or what are the strengths and weaknesses that need to be considered in doing this. When you look up nursing apprenticeships, a lot of them focus on baccalaureate or BSN programs from the 4-year universities, because in some cases, those students are already nurses and they're going back to skill up and obtain a bachelor's degree, which means they're already a licensed nurse. So in our case, what makes it a lot more, I guess, complicated as much as it is just a unique challenge is this is pre-licensure. A lot of these students have never worked in healthcare before. And so there's a lot of learning having to take place in this and really trying to identify, if this model didn't work, what are our alternatives? And then how do we tailor it to fit an employer's needs? Because one set of competencies will not work in a hospital the way that they work in a nursing home or the way that they work in home health. And again, by engaging those companies and by engaging those employers in partnership with our Alabama Office of Apprenticeship, we're going to be able to really kind of tailor and design those models. But more importantly, we'll be able to monitor very quickly, hey, are things working well? Because we're going to know very quick whether this is going to be writing Alabama history or whether this is going to be one of those black stains on Alabama's nursing history, and it's going to fall onto the shoulders of Kenneth Kirkland. So, and that in a nutshell kind of describes Worley and Mohrmans' engage and learn model. And so, if you would please, Dr. K, next slide. So, how do we get there? How do we get to apprenticeships? Well, in the 2021 legislative session, we couldn't reintroduce the same bill that passed in a previous session because it died in the Senate. And so it did require a new legislative sponsor to carry the bill because the former chair of the Senate Healthcare Committee is now the Senate pro tem. And so he can't necessarily introduce new legislation in his role specific to that committee. And so in Senate Bill 179, our one sentence asking for the amendment and writing of rules pertaining to student nurse apprenticeships is there. But there's also another line in there that talks about a completely separate occupation that the Board of Nursing is trying to regulate. And that other occupation is called a medication assistant. And a medication assistant is very similar to nursing assistants, except in about 100 hours, they learn how to give medications under the direct supervision of a nurse. And, I used to work for somebody who said that the number one fundamental rule for all employees is you have to have the ability to read. And so many of our healthcare associations and lobbyists in this state failed to read that it said medication assistant, not medical assistant, like what you would see in a lot of the doctor's offices. Medical assistant is a non-regulated discipline in the state of Alabama. There is no board of medical assistants to regulate who works in those doctor's offices. So while under the supervision of a physician, they can basically delegate what they want to. The interpretation of Senate Bill 179 was, you're trying to regulate our people in the doctor's offices. And so it met major resistance in the Senate Healthcare Committee. And I found myself having to go next door and speak to senators, which is not exactly what I signed up to do. And as one senator pointed out in the committee meeting, just because we're short on airline pilots doesn't mean that we need to train the stewardesses on how to fly. And I very kindly wanted to remind him that just because I hold a physician's license doesn't mean I need to serve on the Senate Healthcare Committee either, but that it's neither here nor there. So I found out today that Senate Bill 179 has successfully passed the committee. It has passed the Senate and is now being taken up by the House of Representatives in Alabama. And once that passes the House, it'll go to the governor and become enacted. And then we can finally get started on bullet point number 2. Now, keep in mind, we've been working on this since 2019. We can't develop the administrative code. We can't develop rules. We can't even begin to engage with employers on what this is going to look like, because if the legislators decide to amend the bill, we're going to have to go back and recreate the work over again. So that brings it into the creation of administrative code. Now, this is providing that it's passed. We've created the act. The governor signed it. There's a nice little picture and hoopla. And then we start writing. And it takes about 60 days to write good administrative code. And that's with any of our state entities. And that's because of a lot of the legal and practice considerations here, because unlike other apprenticeships, we're dealing in people now. And so you want to know that the student nurse apprenticeship who's working under the direct supervision of that nurse at the bedside, they got there by going through a very rigorous process to deserve to stand at that bedside and take care of patients. Once that administrative code is developed, it takes about 35, but no more than 120 days of going to public notice, which means any nurse in the state of Alabama or anyone that's a tax-paying citizen in the state of Alabama has the right to go and file letters or go before the Board of Nursing and either say this administrative code is harmful or this is where you should be considering things. And providing that nobody does that, we can move forward. If there's significant pieces that require legal to look at it, it goes back under consideration, it's amended, and then it goes for another 35 to 120 days. And so eventually it becomes codified and you can begin to actually regulate. Now, why do we need administrative code? The administrative code is going to really help protect students. It will help protect nursing programs. And more importantly, it'll help protect the public. That's the most important piece of that administrative code. And so it will guarantee that an employer, just because they're short-staffed that day, cannot take that student nurse and say, just because you're an employee, you're now going to work as an independent nurse. No, you're always tied to the hip of that apprentice trainer. And so that's a very important piece of what comes next. Something I've very quickly noticed in about the first 6 to 7 months of working on this is every time I would meet with our senior leadership here, our senior leadership consists of about 5 or 6 vice chancellors and our system chief of staff. Every time I would start with, well, here's what we're doing, they would stop me and say, who's we? What are you doing? Not us, you. And so I very quickly figured out that I'm not going to be the one who pushes this down upon the colleges as much as a shared governance committee made up of nursing programs and the Board of Nursing and the Office of Apprenticeship will help create program guides so that we're actually helping provide something that's of use to a program director on how do you implement this. Because each of our programs are programmatically accredited through the Accreditation Commission on the Education for Nurses, or what's called ACEN, ACEN. And, you know, accreditation is one of those things where if I want to increase by 30 more students in nursing, I have to ask 6 months ahead of time. And so these are the type of things that we need to develop those program guides so that we can figure out what are some ideal ways that are, and nothing's easy, but what are some practical ways that programs can approach this so that nobody is feeling like they have to recreate the wheel, but at the same time that they follow some what we call best practices. And we've tried to network with other states to try and identify what those best practices are. And, you know, we'll usually try and start those conversations off with, if you had to start nurse apprenticeships all over again today on day one, what do you wish you had known going in that you could advise us on maybe you need to stay very clear of this because it led to X, Y, and Z? And again, the challenge there is finding states that offer 2-year pre-licensure apprenticeships, because most of the apprenticeships that we've seen in nursing are done by BSN or 4-year university programs with nurses who are already licensed nurses. So it's kind of easy from that standpoint of they're already licensed. You're basically just showing them how to do the job in a 2-year residency. And so to me, that doesn't really represent the uniqueness of apprenticeships, because in my mind, this takes me back historically to what was called diploma nursing, which was a 3-year nursing program. And that 3-year nursing program really consisted of your first 2 years were classroom, lab, and some very specific places. And then your entire 3rd year, you lived in some dormitories next to the hospital, and your entire 3rd year was residency. And you learned how to be a nurse on the floor for a year tied with that specific employer. Dr. K, I'm not seeing a time on my phone. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay.
I can. Okay, and from where I'm sitting, you've got about 4.5 minutes.
Okay, and the last thing I just would add to this is, you know, the next part of this is really just implementing and evaluating. And one of our challenges with implementing is really going to be prior learning experience done with the employer can count towards clinical time in the education program. And that's moving us towards competency-based education, which if you ask any of the regional accreditors or you ask anyone out there, competency-based education in nursing doesn't exist yet. And so there's a lot of challenges, but I'm excited that we're getting there. We're getting a little closer to being able to work on the meat and potatoes of this. but it's just going to take time. And for me, this is the longest project and most complex thing I've ever worked on in my entire life up to this point. And, it'll be fun to see where this goes from here. But that concludes my presentation so far, and I would love to take any questions if anybody's just eager to jump out there.
Hi, Kenneth.
Hi,
This is
Sandra.
Sandra. I'm sorry. I just jumped out there. Look, great presentation. I have a question. I've done a lot of research on CNAs. As a matter of fact, my last program that I came out of, it started out as a thesis. I didn't pull everything together like I wanted to, and it turned into a major project. And I interviewed so many CNAs in the state of Georgia, so many people who are so underpaid. Yet, that group itself is extremely important to the baby boomers because there's such a severe shortage of CNAs. What is this program doing to address, I know you're addressing nursing, but are y'all doing anything to address that CNA issue? Because it's critical.
Okay, so great question. One of the very first health programs I ever got to start from the ground up was a nurse assistant program at my last college. And you can start a nursing program under the I-65 bridge easier than you can start nurse assistant. And
What?
I found out, yeah. So the reason for that is nurse assistant is tied directly into Medicare law. And
Right.
so I can have a PhD in nursing and still not be qualified to teach nurse assistants because I did not work 1 year in long-term care or a nursing home. That's like telling a physician, because you never worked in a nursing home, you can't take care of elderly people. Now, we went as far back in the actual the Code of Federal Registry for this. It hasn't been touched or amended since 2007, and it's going to require federal congressional action to get nurse assistant education standards changed to where colleges can very easily offer this program. That nurse assistant was originally designed to be offered by the employers as an in-house training program and certified independently through state regulatory agencies that do their Medicaid surveys. That's why most of your state departments of public health regulate nurse assistant. But as far as what are we doing to address that, I took a very long rabbit trail. You see how I did that? Very, very long rabbit trail. Okay.
Yep.
To get back to your answer, as my wife would say, you don't care how the sausage is made. You just want to know what's in it, right? So the quick answer to that is in the end of first semester, the students qualify to challenge the nurse assistant exam, the way that all of our nursing curriculums are set up. By the end of second semester, they can challenge the medication assistant exam. Third semester, they can challenge the LPN licensure, and fifth semester, they take the RN. And we call those stackable credentials, so that if a student should be unsuccessful after their second semester, they have a job they can fall back on because they have that credential of value to be able to do that. I can't say that's being done in all of our programs, unfortunately, but the option exists out there. It really depends on how much you really push and recruit for that option, because it's like anything else. If you really want to go after it, you go after it and you start beating the pavement to get it done.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
job.
Hi, Kenneth. It's Julie.
Hi, Julie.
I have so many questions. We probably don't have time for all of them because I actually wrote an apprenticeship program for my company. So I would like to get with you at some point because I have a lot of questions. But I did have at the beginning, you talked about the correctional education. Is that tied to a restorative justice program?
Yes, ma'am. And unfortunately, when you get into the world of corrections, we have a director of corrections education here, because of, are you talking about formerly incarcerated or currently incarcerated? Because the Department of Corrections doesn't let you know when they notify or decide to move an individual. And so retention in those programs for those who are currently incarcerated it's very challenging and always moving metric, because you may have walked into that class of 15 last week and now there's only 2 students because the other 13 of them were transferred to facilities across the state, and they don't notify you, and there's not a database to track that information on the education side of things.
Right.
I don't know that answered your question though. So
yeah, no, you said it was tied to a restorative justice program though, right? Like that's part of the.
yes, ma'am. So as
I don't know
the
if you're
formally
familiar with that.
incarcerated, yes. So as formally incarcerated is transitioning out, our programs have hopefully been there to help pick them up, locate career services through our career centers, but also make sure that they're provided a skill or trade that, you know, gets them into employers who want to hire formerly incarcerated. You know, that's the biggest challenge right now is finding an employer who's willing to say, you know, I'm willing to take that chance on this person. And I hate to say take that chance, but that's how the employers word it. We just don't know if we want to take that chance. It's like, oh, they served their time. What's the point of corrections? I mean, they served their point. So they were punished. They served their time. It's time to get them back into the workforce because if not, your recidivism rate's going to go immediately up because you put them right back in the same environment that unfortunately they came out of. And a lot of our corrections programs here, when they're transitioned out, will move them to, like, I may come out of one of our facilities here in the Montgomery region, and I may be located with a transition house. I don't like calling them halfway houses, but like a transitional house or place of residence in North Alabama to try and keep you out of being returned back to that environment, because they say that if you can keep them out for 120 days employed with the list of references, if something goes wrong, here's who you call, you actually drop the recidivism rate by close to 90% in a lot of cases.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting because the program that I run, it's 18 to 25-year-olds formerly incarcerated, helping. I created an apprenticeship program to get them the job skills that they need. And it's more of a grassroots type program. And it's for that very reason, to reduce recidivism rate, give people, you know, pride in work and all of that stuff. So, yeah, no, fantastic presentation. You have a lot of interesting information.
Well, thank you. I would not encourage you to look at Alabama corrections for anything. We have a bad habit of put you away and lock and throw away and forget you're there. Well, I think one of the worst examples I've seen so far that's just absolutely infuriating was we had a young man who broke into his former high school and stole the mascot uniform, and the mascot uniform just happened to be valued at what ranged as a felony. And in the course of doing that, he just happened to upset a judge's son, or, you know, it's always somebody that you know, and they basically threw the poor old boy under the jail. And when he got out at 25, it's just unfortunate. It really is. So, you know, hopefully our correction system will do better over time, but that's why we have a whole entire branch of our system office here that works with the colleges on correctional education. So.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Kenneth, great job. A bunch of questions as well, but I think my first one is you made a comment. You were presenting to some of your vice chancellors and whatnot, and I think they kind of pitched it back to you. Here's what you're doing and not what we're doing. I know that's a total letdown when you're trying to move the curriculum or the program forward for the whole state of community college system. I just think that for them to not have any buy-in from a governor's initiative is really, I don't know. It's almost like like some legislators need a coloring book version of the bill to really get them to understand it. I think that's a disservice to the citizens and students in Alabama.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's more of like we buy in the shadows. And if this looks really good, then I want you to stand back in the shadow for a second. And boy, howdy, we're going to have some ribbon cuttings and celebrations. Yeah. But if this is a disaster, it's all coming down on your head. Absolutely. Yeah. I had one nursing program director who found out about it. Our nurses, despite working in an environment that constantly is never the same, they're the most resistant discipline that I've dealt with regarding any change whatsoever. And I had one who called me and very kindly reminded me that before I completely bulldoze the nursing profession into the ground in this state, they would like us to really kind of slow down just a little bit. And I said, it's not us driving this anymore. It's the governor's office who drives this. And the last I checked, the governor sits in control of our board of trustees. Yeah, so I think we have to kind of do what the governor says we need to do. And here's the thing, they said, well, we'll just wait the governor out. I said, here's the piece. Every piece of legislation that has passed since 2017 regarding this strategic plan has passed unanimously in both chambers. there is not a single side of opposition to anything having to do with, because think about it. You're basically saying we don't want to educate Alabama workforce. We don't want to educate pre-K to 3 or third grade, and we don't want computers in the schools. Nobody's going to say it. It's probably the most creative political strategic plan I've ever seen in my life, because any governor coming in is not going to be able to stop this now. Wow. So, we're stuck with it. And the fact that Perkins dollars are tied to it is even scarier.
Oh,
so.
Yeah. Perkins, I remember the Perkins loan. I think that's the same from that same federal funding there. My other thing was just to ask the link that I sent. I was just on a committee meeting talking about this apprenticeship program that the Congress is just I think it's House Bill 447. I just sent the link, and this is a partnership with private organizations, maybe like a hospital and community colleges, to pay $1,000 a person for each. It's a great program, and we're going to implement it here. So I think, and even I think it was who was that? Julie, you may even it may be something that you can look into, because it's not just medical, but they're going in that direction. So it's a good link to look at and see how you guys can jump in on that one.
Our Alabama Apprenticeship Act, it put in tax incentives for employers up to, I believe, 6 to 9 apprentices, depending on the size of the employment. And there's some pretty incentivized things that are in there for employers to really want to do this. But the Alabama Office of Apprenticeship got their application to be a state approving agency instead of employers. The resistance to this is employers don't want to go through the feds, through the Department of Labor. And so instead, they can now go through the Alabama Office of Apprenticeship, which is a state approving agency. And that was right before the door just got closed on individual IRAPs or industry recognized apprentice programs and some of those things. And so it is a confusing thing when you're talking, are we talking a registered apprenticeship or an industry recognized apprenticeship, which is less than so many hours. So, I'm okay with the door closing. It's just interesting that they got that application approved, and Alabama's was the last individual state approved agency to be able to do this before the door got temporarily closed. Because, there'll be another administration and they'll come back and open the door again. And then a few years later, they'll close the door again. So,
Yeah. It's man, it's a up and downhill looking at this thing, man. Because I mean, compared to medical students versus nursing, students, they're both, none of them are licensed yet, but yet they give them the free reign to kind of run around and do what they want.
So physicians take 3 different licensure exams before they complete their training. And the first licensure exam is when they complete the first 4 years of med school. It's what makes them a general practitioner. And then as they complete their residency at the end of that, I believe at the end of that internship, they take their second USMLE test. And once they pass that beast, it's like 740 multiple choice questions. Well, it's just a marathon is all that is. And then the next step after that is at the end of residency, they're actually, hopefully board certified in their chosen specialty. But that's how those med students wind up supervising residents supervise the med students and back and forth. But yeah, when it comes to the nursing one, the actual on the ground piece is going to be very complicated. And I'm hopefully the administrative code will be able to help provide some guidance on that.
Yeah. Good luck. Great job. Great job.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Very fine job. We had 2 great presentations tonight, and I do appreciate them very much. Kenneth, all I can say about your project is, man, is that ever complicated? So many moving parts, and you're dealing with politicians. It's scary, but it seems like you're hanging in there and doing a great job with it, and persistence, right? Is that the thing here? It's you're in it for the long haul.
And it did actually help because I was a single position here at the system office. And so because of some of the stuff we're doing now, and thanks to COVID, if there is a silver lining to anything, is it has finally started to provide a little bit of a staff. So, I now got an assistant director and 1/8 of an administrative assistant, whatever that means. I think that means I get to tell her good morning and then leave her alone after that. So
I think that's advisable. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for that, and I think we're gonna move on. Let's go ahead and let's move on with the next part of the program here. Emotional intelligence. Let's see. Oh, yes, very good. Okay, let's talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. You've heard it all before. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the psychologist Daniel Goleman and his work in the area, but it's something that he had popularized that it had been around for a little while. So let's talk about that and try to relate it to transformational leadership, as well as change leadership, making transitions, those types of things. So I'm going to cover some basics first. Spent a lot of time researching this and talking with my colleagues, and really it is emotional intelligence is really a bedrock of transformational and change leadership, and leaders who underestimate EI are likely to fail due to their inability to move followers and satisfy customers. That's from Kim and Kim in 17. And actually, that's true. I mean, you know, if you think about all the things that we've been talking about, and you think about how difficult it is for some people to make a transition through a change. And Sandra, your presentation tonight, and you certainly elaborated on that point quite a bit, as well as Kenneth. Same thing, you know, just people are going to resist change. And if you don't know how to deal with them and bring them along, you're going to have difficulties. So it's more than head. There's also heart that has to go into this. Emotional intelligence is about knowing and managing one's own emotions. Always starts at home. Recognizing and interpreting the emotions of individuals, work groups, and social systems, and using those, excuse me, using those insights to engage and energize the workforce to goal attainment. Again, it starts at home with yourself, to be able to recognize and interpret emotions, and then use your insights to engage and energize the workforce to reach a goal. Key takeaways again, continued. It's about understanding and expressing emotions. If you don't know what the emotions are and you can't express them, it's kind of hard to manage them. Using emotions to facilitate thinking. I'm really angry right now. How is that going to affect how I show up? And what do I need to do to do a better job, make a better decision, those kinds of things. Recognizing and reasoning with emotions is another important area. If you can't recognize them, you can't reason with them or reason with the people. Remember the rider, the elephant, and the path. We're dealing with the elephant here, okay? And we're talking about motivation to move forward during times of change when somebody might be very much against it. Have to kind of drill down and figure out what that is and work with them. Managing emotions and relationships is also important. Here, trust becomes or can become a major issue. But also, sometimes you're in a position where you're having to bring people together that may not be together. They may be on opposite sides or in opposite camps. And then influencing social and emotional behavior. So let's use this as a working definition. Emotional intelligence can best be described as the ability to monitor one's own and other people's emotions, to discriminate between different emotions and label them appropriately, and then to use emotional information to guide thinking and behavior. Now, these are things that we can control. We can monitor our own and other people's emotions. It's not that hard to do, but sometimes we forget to notice. You know, so if I'm angry, happy, sad about something, and I ignore it, it's going to have some impact on my behavior. And the same with other people. If you just blurt out, do or die, get it done, and damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, you may have a lot of people you lose along the way. that kind of thing. So you have to be able to figure out what those emotions are, label them appropriately, the emotions, of course, and then to use the information to guide thinking, behavior, that sort of thing. So emotional intelligence is one part of the human psyche that can be developed. Yay, more good news. And improved by learning and practicing new skills for success in the workplace. So this isn't something that is just natural, or although it might come more naturally to some than others, but it's something that can be learned and practiced like most leadership skills. In practical terms, EI signifies an awareness that emotions can drive behavior, yes, especially when under pressure, and impact people either positively or negatively. It's 5 concepts that you should be aware of as you're developing emotional intelligence strategies, or you're developing strategies for yourself. These are self-awareness, emotional control, self-motivation, empathy, and relationship skills. Self-awareness. Emotional self-awareness is the ability to recognize and understand your moods and emotions as they occur and their effect on others. Or as the saying goes, if you can name it, you can tame it. So, what are some things that would benefit any of us in being more self-aware of our own emotions? Gina.
Hello. So it's so funny because I had this interesting thing happen, and I will do it real quick, tell you real quick. But some of my students did something that they didn't know was wrong, but it was wrong. And a teacher came in my room and just this afternoon chastised me and my students, and then stormed out. And she wasn't yelling, but she was very mean, and she was very frustrated. And immediately my first response was, oh my gosh, you must have some underlying issues against me or something, because I just felt like there was a million other ways they could have handled that, or she could have handled that. And so I was mad and went through all the emotions rather quickly. But when I got home, I decided to send her a text and say, hey, I'm sorry they did that. And I gave them some other options so that it doesn't happen again. And, you know, and she immediately apologized for storming in my room and lashing out like that. And so it got resolved. But had I not acknowledged what happened, my feelings and hers, I think it could have festered and become something it didn't need to be.
That's right. It could have turned into a long-term disagreement that and misunderstanding. See, so that's one of the things that you bring up that's very important about this, is it gives us clarity in the situation, so that we're able to self-manage a little better, and that is really a major step in moving forward and building trust in relationships. Excellent. Does anybody want to share another example?
Dr. K, I just thought about something. My daughter and I, we talk a lot about projecting. You know, sometimes you're not feeling so hot that day and you got the weight of the world on you. So you go out and you walk into a room and you think everybody's talking about you, and they're not. Or you think everybody's after you and they're not. So I can kind of see how this feeds into that. And we kind of have to be careful how we look at situations and how we look at people. And sometimes it's the people that we know probably don't care a whole lot about us. You know, they've said some things, they've done some things, and we already know that. But we have to be careful to project that. Well, for me, I have to be careful projecting how I think those people feel about me, when most of the time they could care less. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. You know, you might not have that much of an impact on what's as you think you do, or positive or negative. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, it's like in the absence of communication, we make things up, don't we? We
Yeah.
kind of fill in the blanks, and sometimes those blanks we fill in make more problems than we started with. Yes, as
Yes.
Carlos says, the man in the mirror. You know, so you got to know yourself. You got to
Yep.
know what you're feeling, and realize that people aren't necessarily out to get you. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Be willing to communicate.
True.
Excellent.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next one. Emotional control. Control. Oh, I kind of like that. All right, emotional control is the ability to think before acting. Again, this is something that's also referred to as self-regulation, even self-management. I've heard that term used and seen it in the research. It is the ability to put space between a stimulus and a response, to stay calm under pressure, to think clearly, and to make good decisions. The truth of the matter is, emotions do impact our behaviors, either negatively or positively. And if we let them run away with us without first stepping back, maybe counting to 10, and then realizing that, just being aware, you know, that there is a problem here, and then kind of identifying and working through it in a more rational and controlled manner, then you have a little chance of really resolving the issue. And when you're dealing with other people, you may even escalate it. And I think your two examples really just kind of hit on that as well. You know, that emotional control. You know, we'll step back. Can I step back now? You know, Carlos, what you got? I see your hand.
Yeah. I just as soon as you said, I was like, man, it has my name written all over it. From being just a crazy person in the military to being a college basketball referee, and having to understand the emotional control of when a coach is wrong and I know I'm right, but I still can't say nothing, or if I kick a call, and how do I get myself out of the dumps and finish the game, because I have to move on into self-control, or the coach lets me know that because I missed a call or kicked a call. And how do I have self-control to move forward and finish my job, and also don't hold a grudge, and have those those black and white lines, as being a being the official for that particular game, and the importance of that. So I when you said it, I was like, man, this referee has taught me so much about making good decisions, and even making a bad decision to put air in a whistle, and having to pick that problem up and carry it, but having to forget about it really quick and go on to the next play. So I think that for me, that's how I've really associated myself, and how this emotional control is. And when everyone's screaming at you because they say you're the worst ever, and
Yeah, exactly. You know, sometimes, like the old saying goes, you know, just count to 10, take a breath, you know, that kind of thing.
yeah,
And then exactly, be able to get in there and make some more rational choices. Important. Self-motivation. Now, self-motivation kind of plays in this because it's a thing that drives us to keep going, you know, even in the face of setbacks, and to show commitment to what we want to achieve. It's our personal drive to improve and achieve more. So we like to keep our eye on the prize, to continue to move forward always. And what that relates to in terms of emotional intelligence strategies, I think, I'll say this, at least for me, is to realize that there are bigger goals and bigger objectives to be met that are important, more important than letting my emotions run away with me. And that if I can take some time, do a little reflection, step back, exercise a little control, I will be more likely to reach those goals. So it's more of an incentive, I think, than anything else to do some of these other things. What are your thoughts on the matter?
Dr. K, I think this is so critical because I've spoken to a lot of people who've gotten in a lot of trouble because they could not get their emotions under control. And they could have done and been anything God had created them to be. But yet, they got in trouble because they could not back up and realize that if I do this thing, this is gonna interfere with my destiny and my future. And so they just throw it all out the window for a couple of moments, seconds of anger. And I know some people who've done this, and the dreams are just crushed. And not that they can't pick back up on it, but look at all they got to go through to get back to it. And people have done it. But yeah, this is critical right here to me. We have to be really careful.
Absolutely. And once you break that trust, those opportunities kind of get away from you. Julie, you have your hand up.
Yes, I think too with self-motivation, like recently trying to work with employees, I think it's harder, even like especially in a remote environment, it's hard to learn what motivates people, because I think that we all have to be self-motivated, but I think in the workplace, it is leadership's responsibility to understand what the motivation of their people are, so they can be properly rewarded. And I think that that's been an extreme challenge since we have all gone so remote. And I'm not sure how to overcome that as far as it goes for being sensitive to everybody's time and needs. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's a difficult challenge, and you bring up an excellent point there. The truth is we all have our own self-motivations, and part of emotionally controlling ourselves is to understand our own self-motivations, but also to be able to appeal to the elephant in others. We have to communicate with them to determine what theirs are, to have a better understanding. And that's where that communication piece comes in, becomes so important. And so I think a lot of times what it comes down to is just finding ways to communicate, to make contact. And a lot of times that's going to be outside of the group meeting. You know what I mean? Kind of a more one-on-one thing. Takes time, takes effort, especially if you're on distance work, that kind of thing. So it's a challenge. It can definitely be a challenge.
Right.
All right. Good point. Those are great points. Empathy. So empathy is an awareness of the needs and feelings of others, both individually and in groups, and being able to see things from their point of view, from their perspective. Actively listen to the verbal and nonverbal cues of others to understand them better, and provide reflective feedback to clarify your understanding. And when I think of this, there's a couple of things at play here. One is to care enough to want to learn what the motivations of others are, try to learn where they're coming from, what their feelings are, and then also to that implies listening, and in a non-judgmental way, giving them a little feedback and those kinds of things as to what you think they're saying, so that they can clarify your understanding. So a lot of that goes back to that communication piece. What are your thoughts on that?
Dr. K, well, my I would just wonder what you do when you have leadership that has not, I'm not even sure if they have this capability. Like, I mean, really, because like some of the people that I work with, they're from like a whole nother planet. I mean, the things that they say, the lack of ability to even make a connection of any sort. So I know that, they say you can develop these skills, but I do think that there are some people that are not interested.
They may not be, and that makes it very difficult, especially if you're in a consultant role and you're coming from outside of an organ or an internal consultant. It's even worse for them. But a consultant role in any kind of capacity is always going to be met with some sort of resistance. But here's what we're talking about. It's helping people move through those transitions. So if you're talking about somebody that you're working for, a leader in the organization, if you're in a position where you're having to coach them, that becomes a more of a critical conversation with them as to how they can become more successful. I would imagine.
Right.
I don't know what your situation is you're dealing with, but it sounds like some serious conversation needs to occur to be able to move forward. And you're right. Sometimes people there are people that just don't want to play.
Right.
What do? You wait them out, or you go find another environment to go to, or you help, or if you're in a good position, you help them to their next job, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's sometimes that the decision has to be made that either you remove yourself or that person is removed from the environment, because it does come to the point where you can work all these strategies, and if there's no interest on the other side, it's impossible to make progress.
Right. And if you have empathy for them, you'll at least try to communicate with them and try to bring them along. But again, you get to a point as a leader where you kind of have to move on.
Right.
Absolutely. Kimberly, you have a question or a comment?
Yes, and I was gonna take my hand down because y'all just pretty much touched on what I was gonna say. But basically, I agree with what Julie was saying. I think empathy is something a lot of people just have innately. It's an innate trait. And I hate to say this, but especially for women, I think more women, they have that natural tendency to kind of, cater to people and they really seem to care. Because I work with a lot of men, and it's just like it's harder for them to really care. And I'm not saying all men. I'm just saying the ones I work with. It's just they just really don't, and they're less effective because of that. And it's just and then when they see it in me, it's sort of like, when I try to encourage them to be more empathetic, and they see the response that I get from the employees, that they open up, and they're more motivated because they feel like, okay, Kim gets me, she hears me, she understands me. So they almost fake it, but the employees can see right through it. They know that they view it as more manipulative, like you're just pretending to care so that you can get me to do what you want me to do, type thing. So that I think empathy is so important, and it's so simple for who it's simple for, and it's so difficult for who it's difficult for, if that makes sense.
And maybe they're just trying, maybe they're still learning. They haven't quite gotten it out, and that takes time. I will tell you, it took me many years to work and actively work on my empathy, because especially being in the military environment, you didn't see a whole lot of empathy a lot of the time. So, and I will also say that my best lessons were learned when I didn't, and I should have. So, Kenneth.
Hey, I was just going to comment on and the empathy part too. Of sometimes a practical exercise, I think it's kind of nice when you can actually lead people through that. I know a few of us in the group are working in education now, and it varies, of course. But if you go to an organization called Achieving the Dream, I think it may be in part of their toolkit. But there's a as corny as it sounds, there is a board game that part of their implementation or rollout, all the people at the organization play this board game sitting at these big long tables. And you are a 35-year-old, and it's always the student has some type of disparity or some type of disadvantaged background. And as they advance through the game, trying to get to graduation or degree attainment, these life events keep occurring to them. And by the time you reach the end, you may have started with 8 people at the table. One person might actually obtain that college degree or that actual long certificate. And I'll tell you, I've seen some of the more hardened, what I call veteran faculty in health sciences who just, it was hard for me to get my nursing license. It's going to be hard for you to get yours. And, they sit down and do that game, and there's a lot of hung heads and a lot of real sad eyes looking around that table of, we could probably all afford to do a lot better job of being a little bit more empathetic to people.
Absolutely. And I would ask you this, is that a game that could be adapted to any environment?
I would think so. I was just kind of thinking, if I was an external consultant and you were trying to really try and do something like that, how would that work if I was in advanced manufacturing or, some of those other places? Because I worked in plastic injection molding before I got into healthcare. And, I remember being told once by a floor supervisor, I don't know why you're smiling so big to be as useless as you are. And
ooh, nice.
Thankfully, I got a good sense of humor about things. But it's a tough work. It's tough working with a bunch of machinists and people that just don't understand that. It's okay to be empathetic and let your guard down. It's okay to be human, right?
Dude, I understand. I used to load bombs for a living. Just saying. So at any rate, if you have an opportunity and you think about it and have information about that game, I'd love to have that so I could take a look at it, might evaluate it for use in one of our in-persons. Could be fun. Relationship skills or social skills. Now, these are important. Some of us are naturally more inclined in this area than others. It's still something that can be developed. It takes work, takes practice. So these encompass a wide range of interpersonal and leadership skills. They range from leadership through influencing and persuading others, managing conflict, as well as working in a team. It's also the ability to build trust and networks of connections through people. Like we were saying, some people are going to have an easier time with that than others. If they don't have a lot of empathy for others, they may have a real difficult time building that trust and building those relationships. And really, in our line of work, in anybody's line of work, trust is central. Developing that trust is central to being able to make effective changes. So there's a couple of more points that I do want to hit on here. I'm kind of tracking my time. I'll try not to go over too much. Figure I'm on a plus or minus 5 here, so I'm going to move on to my references. See, I got you. So before we do move on, though, I was having so much fun, I forgot where I was. Yeah, that's it. I'll admit it. What's my emotion? Embarrassment. How am I handling it? I'm joking about it. Okay. Anyway, so let's talk about these relationship skills just for a moment or two. Is this something that you have had to work on? Anybody? And if so, how did you develop in that area?
Dr. K?
Jamil, hello.
Hi. I think for me, I'm more of a people's person. So relationship skills kind of come naturally to me, but it's more difficult for me when it's like a person who isn't empathetic or isn't open to building relationships. That's when I find it challenging. So I try to make myself relatable and personable to try to build those connections to make it easier. Sometimes people are just stubborn and it's just hard to relate to people. But I think just taking the initiative and trying to be open to building a relationship with someone, even if you have different views on things, I think that's a big help. but for the most part, I think the relationship, the social skills part has come a little bit more naturally for me. But at the beginning, I think it's because of my experience with high school. They put me in organizations and sent me to conferences where I was the only person. I had no choice but to talk to people who were in my group. So the more I practiced, the more natural it became.
Yes, and that becomes, if you're somebody that's painfully shy, or you're really not into having a lot of empathy for others. I mean, and that's not to say they're the same, but if you have any of those things going on, I would think the first thing that you would want to do is at least be aware of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Be aware of them, and then communicate. My friend Dr. Janae nailed it right on the head there. I mean, in Paige Roberts as well, and John Bentley, they're all basically saying the same thing. We have to kind of try to reach each other, and do the best job that we can with that, and to learn where we're from, find out what those emotions are so we can name it and tame it, so to speak, and make good decisions, and control our own emotions, and hopefully influence others and the raging elephants within them to a more positive direction, or to move towards the changes we're trying to make. So thank you for all of that. I appreciate it. And the research. Yeah, can't forget the research, right? There it is. All right. So lots of good stuff there. I even managed to get a Brad Shuck in there, among others. So a lot of good stuff. All right, moving right along. I appreciate your inputs, everyone, on all of that. It's important to think about, especially as we're trying to move people through transitions and changes, and to bring them along, find out who our resistors are. But it's more than just that. It's also about trying to reach them, and to bring them onto the team, or at least finding what it is that's keeping them from moving forward. So good job. All right, upcoming, one of my favorite pictures. There it is. Hey. Okay, upcoming next week, 9 March, last session. We have Heather and Kimberly, and we're going to be talking about McKinsey's 7s and Galpin's 9 wedge models. So if you would please remember, Heather and Kimberly, to upload your PowerPoints the night before, and we will be golden. So thank you so much for that. Great presentations from the very beginning. Y'all done such a bang-up job, and I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to these last two as well. So thanks so much. Okay, change model case study paper. Okay, that's due on the 7th. So hopefully everybody's making great progress on that, and we'll get those in on time. Personal change, anything challenge. We were talking about that a little bit. I think Sandra, you might have mentioned it earlier tonight as you were giving your presentation. So don't forget those. They're also due on the 7th. Change model case study PowerPoints, we already discussed that. And when it's all said and done, and we've had our 2 presentations next week, I'll take the last half hour, 20 minutes, and we'll do a course wrap up. So if you have questions or thoughts, bring them with you regarding the wrap up, and then we'll be out of here. So, not too bad on time. I stayed in my plus or minus 5. If we're lucky, next week I'll get you out 5 early. No promises. I do my best. All right. You're all beautiful. We had a great night. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of the evening. Remember, if you have any questions, ask early, ask often. You know where to reach me. Piece of cake, right? And we'll be talking again soon. Have a good one.
Good night.
All right. Good night.
Good
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.